All right, so I was watching the Epic Economist's latest video on food stamps and the people that are for and against it, and I didn't know what side of the fence I was on. I've been on food stamps 3 times, I think, in my life, and all 3 of those times I was homeless or near it, or on the verge of it, or somewhere very close to homeless. And I never stayed on them for very long. And I only stayed on them as long as it took me to find a job that paid something, right? Because you practically have to be homeless. Or, as a lot of the people were complaining in all of these TikTok videos, is that people keep having more kids to get more food stamps. And the way I see it is that kids are innocent, right? I didn't choose to be born. I didn't choose to be with a person that needed food stamps in order to feed me because they preferred spending their money on other things. And that was my parents. But I grew up looking at that, knowing full well that this program and that food service, what do I call these? Food emergency food providers, government cheese, government butter, government milk. I grew up with that. It's just a white label that says butter on the outside, and it was not exactly the best tasting stuff. But food stamps give you the ability to buy anything you want, from Doritos to soda to anything. So I can understand from that perspective that as a person that works that can't afford food stamps, that sometimes you can't afford to buy the foods that you actually want. Like today, for my meal to spice up my ramen in the morning, I bought hot dogs. They were 2 for $4. So I didn't get the best quality hot dogs, but I bought what I could afford. And to think that people don't want people to get food stamps is very, I would say, almost hostile. But we've seen those videos that show other people getting mad when they see someone using food stamps at a checkout because they don't qualify for them. And a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, especially during the bug years, that when people saw someone else getting something, it just really enraged them because they would say stupid things like, well, I work all these hours and I can't afford those things. Well, ask yourself why you can't afford those things. Take into consideration that food stamps are a byproduct of a broken system that's been broken for a long time. The government has to provide food to the workers of corporations, including Walmart, the largest retail corporation in the world, and all of its workers are making minimum wage unnecessarily just because they're counting on someone to feed their workers. And I've never understood how you can get away with forcing other people to have to make certain that your workers can afford to eat. No person working a 40-hour work week, even a 20-hour work week. You guys know I'm a strong advocate of the 1 hour, 1 day work week because it makes as much sense as a 40-hour work week, in my opinion. We don't get anything out of it either way. So you might as well have free time while you go to work 1 day a week. But with that said, let's refocus. So child, today's title is why 6 in 10 Gen Z workers get fired immediately. So every time I can't come up with an idea, I just go back and look at my own videos and see what I was talking about a year ago. Because it seems like these problems just didn't sneak up on us. These problems have been building up over years of not finding correct answers to the toughest questions our society has to offer. Why is anyone paid minimum wage? So let's get into today's opening monologue. Every job promises opportunity, and somehow the only opportunity is the opportunity to lose your sanity. Yeah, welcome to the modern workforce where 6 in 10 Gen Z workers get fired faster than you can say, you're like family here. It's not because they're lazy, entitled, or glued to their phones. It's because they walked into capitalism without the required level of delusion. They saw the dead end for what it is, and that's the one thing employers can't forgive. This is what happens every time you hire a Gen Z worker or a person that expects to be able to make a life when they work in a place that doesn't offer a living wage. I've seen this for years. They walk in here, they think they're going to get promoted right away. They think that they're on the fast track to some amazing career, and then they realize you're not getting a raise. You're not getting flexible hours. There's no such thing as life work balance. Gen Z's just very disappointed with what they're expected to put up with. And I've seen this firsthand. I've seen workers who, unless they live at home, you can't take a job that's paying you less than $20 an hour. Unless you're sharing your expenses with another person, you can't afford to live on those wages. When rent is $2,000, you're not living on less than $20 an hour. Even in California, living wages start at $26 an hour. The minimum wage was raised to $20 an hour for fast food workers. I believe of large chains, I think they have to have 100 workers or more. Some weird, like, oh my gosh, some weird caveat about what the requirements are, but it doesn't affect small restaurants, just the big chain ones. But anyhow, even at that price, if you were to pay your workers $20 an hour, restaurants are still going to find some way of making certain that that person can't get ahead. And the main way that they do it is by making certain that they have to pay you a certain amount. They're not going to give you hours. They'll give you 19. If they're really busy, they'll give you 30. But you never really become a full-time employee because it's always about them making more money. And I've seen this every place that I've worked at that pays practically nothing, is that your hours aren't guaranteed. They're not going to give you benefits. And it just because they won't give you something like enough money to eat or medical care doesn't mean you don't need it. It means you just go without it if you can't qualify for it by being poor. So imagine that. We have a system that incentivizes corporations to treat workers like they have absolutely no benefit to them while relying 100% for them to build their pyramid. And you kind of scratch your head and you think to yourself, well, why would anyone support this system? Because the poor don't have people that go to Washington and advocate for them. No one cares if Johnny Sixpack can't afford to buy, I don't know, condoms this week so he doesn't have more children. And Susie Rottencrotch, well, she's given up on the whole system. She knows she's going to be a single mom for the rest of her life. I know. I'm a direct byproduct of Susie Rottencrotch. 5 baby daddies, none of them paying child support, and somehow she has to raise all these children. And this is something that someone in the Epic Economist video said. It's like, it's simple biology, right? If Susie Rottencrotch is going to be behind the Taco Bell and she can't afford to take those special medicines that keep her pure or without child, well, then it's just going to keep happening over and over again. I have half brothers and half sisters somewhere in the world that I haven't seen since I was a teenager. I wouldn't even know what they look like anymore. But that's just what happens in a world where people get accustomed to having not to be responsible for their own breeding. This is why I will never have children. I never ever wanted to have children because I knew that I could never afford them. It became an affordability problem that apparently our parents didn't understand, that when you increase the size of your family, your wages have to go up in order for you to be able to feed another hungry mouth. So what a lot of people in these TikToks were saying is these people did it to themselves. But my point will always be, did I choose to be here? No. If given the choice right now between living this horrible effing life that I've lived or not living at all, I would have chose the latter. I do not want to be here. I do not want to have children. I do not want anything to do with this world, but I'm stuck here, right? As they say, you're too scared to do anything about it because you don't know what's going to happen. The worst thing you can do, and I know this because I was in college, I was living in a dorm, and there was a girl that decided that she'd had enough. So she took a leap of faith. And the only thing that happened to her was she landed, everything in her body was broken, but she was left crippled for the rest of her life. And that's what a lot of people are afraid of, that you might not be able to do things the way that you actually wanted to do them. And now you're worse off. Now you're stuck inside of a shell for the rest of your life. But I'm off on a tangent, kind of a morbid tangent. But I was aware of what happens. In fact, I had another person that I knew at the same time who was actually friends with that person, who I think she was the person that actually found her after after the accident, and she said she could just hear faint moaning like in the bushes. And when she went and to look at her, she was just all broken. And she told me that the way she got out of it was she went to therapy to try to block out the memories of the night. But that's what she had to do in order to keep not seeing those images every night when she went to sleep. Again, off on a tangent. Let's get into talking point number one before we get on to any more morbid tangents. Okay, jobs don't want workers anymore. They want voluntary prisoners who call it gratitude. If you're smiling while you're drowning, they promote you to team lead. Voluntary prisoners. I mean, if you look at what I've said for years, we're living in the work release program, right? You're not making enough to be able to afford anything that you actually want. You have a cellmate that you call a roommate. Whether your cellmate is at you're sharing a residence, or as I like to call coworkers, cellmates, because no one wants to work anymore, right? We've never wanted to work, but now you're stuck with cellmate A, B, and C. You may not like any of those cellmates. And we know that the sadistic guards will come and rattle the cage just to make certain that they're getting the maximum productivity from their voluntary prisoners. Because imagine that. What's your worker ID number? It's a prison number. And so this is how they identify you inside of a system. You're not Johnny Sixpack. You're prisoner 0001 that they have to pay so much money for at the end of the week. And they don't like that. If there's one thing that we know American corporations don't want to do is waste money on payroll. And it's simply, it's numbers. Amazon, who was it at the beginning of this month, had record profits, yet they slashed 30,000 workers. I believe Microsoft did the same thing. We've lost 1 million jobs this year to corporations that are making record profits. And then you wonder, well, what did the worker do wrong? Well, you were too expensive. They wanted to pay you in dog food, and you needed real money to pay your rent, to pay for your car, and to be able to eat. You needed money for life necessities, the basics. The corporations didn't see it that way. Payroll is the biggest waste of money at any corporation. The more they can save by cutting on people and making you do 2 to 3 or even 5 different jobs, they will take it. I've said this for years, is that when I started working in the tech industry decades ago, a job like mine would have been divided into maybe even 20 people. And I heard that a couple weeks ago from another McDonald's worker who said, at my last job, they had 5 people doing what I do at the Death Star right now. And then he even went even further and said at the company he was at before that one, at that particular Taco Bell, they had 20 people doing the same job that he's currently doing. But here, they have one person. And corporations love that. Why would you hire 20 people to do the job that you can force one person to do and then wonder why they're doing it so poorly? Which is classic corporate America's way of doing business. Why bother to adequately staff? When I worked at Walmart, and a bunch of people would call out inevitably, right? It's Walmart. No one's happy there. No one's making a living there. No one wants that job. So people would call out routinely and disappear regularly, as in never come back. That was the normal. I would say that if there was one guarantee of how you were going to leave, that particular retail job, it was you just didn't come back. There was no, hey, I'm resigning, hey, this, hey, that. No. And I've seen them punish people for putting in their 2 weeks, and I've made entire videos about this. Putting in your 2 weeks is telling your employer that you don't want to work there anymore. What does your worker think instantly? Ungrateful worker, fire them on the spot. I've seen that happen to at least a dozen people in my life. It's probably happened to you. Thousands of people think they're doing the right thing by putting in their 2 weeks, and all your employer thinks to themselves is they're going to ignore you till you're not there anymore, or they're going to fire you on the spot. I saw that happen on a regular basis when I worked at Insight. People would find better jobs. No one wanted to work at Insight. It's a horrible company to work for. And the turnover was probably 150%. I mean, I saw 12 people get up out of their cubicles and walk out of the building because the job sucked that bad. And the next day, they just hired someone from Craigslist, and there's one guy working for all those people. And I'd walk past him and I'm like, how are you still sane? And he's just like, I just need to feed my family. That's what it came down to. I just need to feed my family. It doesn't matter what I do. I could, you're talking about people who would line up just so that someone could stab them with a hot poker all day long in the ears over and over and over again because that's the best that they could do. They were so desperate for employment that if you're working in a call center, you've reached the level 0 of desperation. There are a lot of people out there who are in chicken costumes right now. It's Saturday afternoon, and they're doing whatever it takes in order to make money. No person wants to get on a stage with no clothes on and shake their booty. But there are people that have to do that job. And in a sense, we're all doing that job. Yesterday, I asked ChatGPT, it's like, what is dancing really? Like when it comes down to what dancing is and human beings getting down while they're dancing, it's just human beings wiggling to noise. That's what dancing to me is like. And when I think about the workplace, that's all I see people doing. You're just wiggling in place inside of a cubicle all day long so that someone will give you money. It doesn't really matter what you do. In fact, I've heard that so many different times. It doesn't matter what you do. You're selling your time for the ability to eat. And that is truly what work is. Because you're never going to get rich from it. You're never going to get ahead from it because it was never designed to do that. Capitalists captivate on your inability to be rich like them. So everyone else that's not rich, they have to be able to use your time to enrich themselves. And they will continue to do it till the end of time. And no matter how much you struggle, how much you try, unless you're able to somehow start your own business and enslave a bunch of other people and pay them minimum wage, and then have the audacity to ask the simple question, why don't these people work hard? Why are they not dependable? Why can't I trust them to do a good job if you're not watching them? Because that's what workers do. They are notoriously bad at being slaves. During the plantation times, the worst kind of slaves that they could get is they'd round up the best slaves they could. But the ones that weren't good at captivity, well, they found ways of getting rid of them. Because that's what America has. It's created a workplace where only the best workers get to keep those jobs. And everyone else just plays a musical chair. We've met these people. They are working whatever $16 an hour job they can get. They don't stay long anywhere. And corporations don't like job hoppers. And that's one of the main reasons why Gen Z isn't seen as being favorable for the corporation. They don't like the circumstances. So therefore, they move around thinking that some other $16 an hour job is going to be better than the one that they currently have. The joke's on them. No matter where they go, no one's going to treat them with any amount of respect. Because any worker that you don't have to provide any training to, and then they fail at the job, and then you blame them, it always comes down to blaming people for not being able to do the job without any training on day one. Because they're counting. Remember, Gen Z doesn't have the 3 to 5 years of of training in order for them to be able to do the job that they got hired for. So once they take a chance on Gen Z and they bring them in, they're immediately fired because they needed someone who could take off on day one, who had the ability, who had the capability of adapting in place. But if you've never been in a super high demand workplace before, all you're going to do is fail. And corporate America is fine with firing Gen Z because they're unwilling to let themselves be exploited. Either learn the job or fail at the job. And this is what I've heard before. It's either sink or swim with every position that you get into. You're either going to be able to do it to the performance level expected of you, or you won't, and you'll be thrown out the second that they can get rid of you. That's just the way that things work. They've created the expectations so high that it's nearly impossible for Gen Z to be able to fit the mold that they want. And then when they ask why they're not thriving in the workplace, look at what you created. You threw them into a cesspool and they drowned. And then you blame them. It's always about blaming other people for not being good enough. Anyhow, let's get into our closing monologue. I had a bunch of other talking points, but again, I never know what these videos are going to look like until I start talking. I have talking points, but everything else is just off the cuff. So let's get one thing straight. Gen Z isn't tanking the workforce, they're exposing it. They're not quitting too fast, they're realizing too fast. And every time a young worker walks out of a miserable job instead of dying in it, the system loses just a little bit of the control it depends on. The future won't collapse because people stop working. It'll collapse because people stop believing the lie that working was ever going to save them. Now look at your own life and ask the question we're all afraid to say out loud. Are we bad employees? I would say yes. I would say that the vast majority of employees are bad. Like that guy that I mentioned I'm not sure when you guys are going to see this video. This future is recorded way ahead of time. But that fast food worker that decided to smuggle a Big Mac in his pants and then got caught. And immediately the reaction by the boss was, we don't care if you're hungry. You take from work and you're not here anymore. Literally, taking food from work is a reason to fire you. When I worked at Walmart, it was common for workers to go take food from the dumpster until they started destroying the food because they said that workers taking food out of the dumpster hurts Walmart because you're stealing. Because they want you to buy the food inside the store. They don't want you having anything for free. They give you, according to them, more than enough money in your wages. You shouldn't need to take food from the dumpster. But the fact that the fact that this guy got fired for smuggling that hamburger in his pants, it's sick, people. It's a disease. Greed is a disease that rots the brain. Greed is equivalent to syphilis. It rots the brain. It makes them make bad decisions at the same time, punishing you for being hungry. Anyhow, let's leave it there. It's Saturday afternoon. You guys are probably going to watch this next week, maybe Thursday, Friday, maybe even next weekend. These are all so far ahead of pre-recorded. Anyhow, I hope you guys had a good work week, and future Millennials team thanks you. I'd ask you to give it a thumbs up, hit the like, leave a comment, say whatever you want. Tell me how you crapped your pants today because you looked at your paycheck and you couldn't believe the size of it.